is SHENNELL McLeod, and I am so thrilled and excited to welcome you to another segment of Plainfield Speaks. I am joined with Mayor ADRIANO Mapp, and the goal of this show is to ensure that we can continue to address the questions, concerns, and thoughts of the Plainfield, New Jersey community. And with that, we saw no other segment more important right now than having an amazing conversation about education, specifically the state of education in Plainfield, New Jersey. Mayor Mapp, how are you today?
I am doing wonderful, SHENNELL, and I want to thank you for moderating yet another session of Plainfield Speaks. And I also am grateful for the fact that we have some educators that are going to be participating in this conversation this evening. So thank you so very much.
Yes, not a problem. It's really good to see you. And with that, I want to turn it over. Let's bring our guests onto the show and let's have them actually introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what's top of mind for them right now as an educator. With that, let me turn it over to you, Leah. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, great evening to the great Queen City of Plainfield. My name is LEAH DADE, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of Second Street Youth Center. All of you who have lived in Plainfield know Second Street Youth Center. It has been an anchor institution in Plainfield for over 55 years, and we are currently housed in our brand new education center that was built as a result of a collaborative with this amazing mayor and the city of Plainfield. So we are excited to educate 210 early childhood children, ages 3 to 5, and then of course have our after school program that has a focus on STEM and educational advancement, and then our summer STEAM initiative that focuses on helping to reduce the summer slide that our children experience during the summer. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about this conversation. It's a much needed conversation that is taking place regarding the state of education across our nation, the state, and of course, this great city of Plainfield. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, Leah. It's so good to have you. I've been to visit the center. I think it's beautiful. Just for clarity for our viewers, the center is currently open right now, yes?
We are currently open, and we have been open since November the 9th. And we have hybrid going on. So we actually have 155 children, half of whom are actually in the center live every day and loving every minute of it, and half of whom are operating virtually with our virtual program as well. So all the children that are enrolled are very happy, health and safety, and safe and doing well.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. Let's bring our next amazing educator onto the show to introduce themselves. Okay, hi, Shalonda. It's so good to see you.
Hi, I wasn't sure we were just jumping in next. So I am Shalonda Archibald. I am a former Plainfield Public Schools educator. I'm a literacy coach, reading specialist, and education consultant.
Okay, amazing. Shalonda, thank you so much for being here and joining us in this very important conversation to our community. And finally, let's bring our other amazing guests onto the scene. Hello, hi, Danielle.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you, SHENNELL. Thank you, Mayor Mapp, for the opportunity to engage in this conversation today. I am super excited to talk about our students and their return. Our scholars are coming back to school. We've been virtual for the majority of the year, but we know that it's time. I'm Danielle West, and I lead Queen City Academy Charter School in Plainfield, New Jersey. We are the oldest charter school in Plainfield. We have now been in our 21st year of operation. So we are definitely cemented in the community. We serve the community, and we are really looking forward to making sure that COVID becomes not just something that happened to us as a school, but something that allows us to flourish in the midst of all that has happened. We looked at the opportunity to how do we reinvent ourselves at this point in time. So I'm excited to really sit down and engage in that conversation with everyone today about what education can do after COVID to make sure that things look different, because things should not be the same. Once we leave this space of COVID and return back to our classrooms, many classrooms have not always served Black and Latino students very well. And so this is our opportunity to get it right. And I'm happy to be here today to engage in that conversation about what are some things that we will do to get it right.
Yes, I love that, Danielle. And I think it leads really nicely into one of the first questions that I think we have. And Mayor, I love it if you kick us off, and then I want to pivot to Danielle. What is the number one concern right now as we're thinking about education in the city of Plainfield amid our health pandemic?
Well, certainly, safety is the overriding and number one concern in the minds of parents, teachers, and students. And I remain very concerned about the safety of all of our residents. And some of you may recall that I was the author of an editorial back in the latter part of last year where I made the case for why students ought to be at home in a virtual environment out of safety. That is the number one priority. I have since modified my position on that because of the changes that have occurred and the progress that we have seen. And so with the advent of the vaccine, and now we are the third vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is a single dose vaccine, and the fact that the cases are on the decline at present, I believe that we are at a point where we can bring our students back into the classroom. That doesn't mean that I am no longer concerned about the safety and the well-being of students, teachers, and administrators. I remain very concerned, but I think that at the end of the day, we have to make the right decisions based on the science and based on what is in the best interest of our people. And so safety is still my concern, but I believe that we are at that point when students can return safely to the classroom.
Absolutely. I think safety is probably on the minds of a lot of our residents here in Plainfield. Danielle, interested to hear your thoughts. What is your top concern right now?
Of course, as Mayor Mapp mentioned, safety, that goes without saying for us, making sure that our staff and our students return and that we've provided an environment that is safe for them and, all the CDC recommendations are being followed. But outside of the safety realm, my top concern, I think it's a culmination of the effects of COVID that we've seen happen with Black and Brown people in general, but also what we've seen in terms of social and civil unrest. It has really, for me, the fire has always been there, but it has brought it up on several notches for me to say, no longer can we wait, right? We can't wait until everyone's in position and everyone's on board to make sure that we have programming that looks like and serves the interests of the students that sit in our seats. So, this year, while COVID was going on, we also just jumped head in to diversity, equity, and inclusion work as a staff, and also making sure that we engaged our student population in something different. So every Wednesday, our students have been taking coding classes with the Coder School of Montgomery, which is based out of Silicon Valley, but they have one in Montgomery and one in Short Hills that we've formed a partnership with. It's time to do things differently for our kids. And so I wouldn't be myself, and I wouldn't be able to look at this as not being an opportunity to do it differently for the students that sit before me. And that requires me to make sure that the teachers that sit before those students are trained differently, that they begin to look at their own implicit bias and explicit bias that they hold at times, right? And so that they go in with a change mindset. Our teachers are even coming back on March 15th into the building. And the first 2 weeks that the teachers come back, their students are not there. We're going to spend more time diving just into protocols and setting ourselves up for the stage of what this really is and what it looks like and what it can be for our kids. So we have Barute Kafele coming to speak with our teachers just to get them energized and know that, you know, this conversation of equity is really important now, because we've just watched a whole community of people that didn't have equity, right? And we watched many of our families lose loved ones. That didn't happen in every community. We watched many of our families be impacted by job loss because of restaurants closing or whatever the like may be.
Sure.
And so for me right now, it is really making sure that our staff and our school community understand the importance of providing an environment that is a space, a safe space, and an equitable space for our scholars.
I love that so much. And I think you're hitting at something that's really important, which is how are we reimagining education in a pivotal moment where we have the opportunity to. Before we shift to that, because I want to make sure I get to that, Leah, interested to hear from you as you've been, you know, you're active, your center's open, it's been open since November. What are some of the concerns that you're hearing specifically from the community as it pertains to education? What are your concerns?
Well, I will tell you, had you asked me this question a year ago, I would have had a whole conversation with you on the issue of the development gap and the achievement gap between Black and brown children and those their white counterparts in more affluent communities, right? The achievement gap focuses on where they fall academically differently and how they fall far further behind. And the development gap focuses on the fact that due to socioeconomic situations, our children do not have the exact same experiences as their white counterparts. As a result of the lack of experiences, they do not become informed learners and thinkers, right? But I will tell you, and my sister hit on it, I definitely was going to speak to the issue of equity, but since she touched on it, my second greatest concern, and the one that we are focused on with our children at SSYC, is the issue of trauma. That they are dealing with trauma. There is major trauma going on, even with children who are 3 and 4 years old. And so being able to be informed on the issue of trauma and how to begin to deal with the trauma that our children are experiencing as a direct result of COVID, as a direct result of being away from the connectivity of families. And then, of course, being in a population that has a high immigrant population here in Plainfield, our children have experienced the trauma of losing parents to the immigration system and how they're dealing with those things. So I will tell you that one of the top concerns that I have right now is trauma and ensuring that my staff is properly trained on how to spot trauma and then how to intervene and then how to discuss it with parents. There's stigma related to trauma and stigma related to parents feeling that they could be judged because of some of the decisions that they've made. And so we want to make sure that we create that safe place in our education system for parents to get help, for teachers to be properly informed and properly educated on how to deal with trauma, and then to link families to the necessary resources, which is something that we do on a regular basis at Second Street Youth Center, so that we ensure that the families are getting the holistic mental health treatment that they need to be able to manage the trauma and heal from it and be able to move forward. So I would definitely say, right along with my sister, the issue of social justice, which I had up there, was the issue of trauma.
Yes, absolutely. It seems like I was trying to ease us into the conversation, but it seems like you all are ready. You're ready to jump in. So let's jump in. Shalonda, switching the topic a little bit and going off of what was just said, mental health and wellness is something that is continuously rising to the top of the conversation as it pertains to education. What are some of your thoughts about how we should be thinking about addressing mental health and wellness as we continue to work with our students through remote learning and potentially having them back in the classroom?
I think that it definitely needs to be across the board. So we're talking teachers, we're talking students, we're talking school leaders, we're talking mental health for everyone. There isn't anyone who hasn't been affected by the pandemic. And I think with everything that's happened and the pressure to make sure that the students are safe, that the families are pulled in, sometimes everyone else who makes everything possible aren't included in the safety protocols. And mental health is definitely a big top issue, considering that homes have now become schools. So there's no separation. You know, you don't get to step out of your home and go to your classroom if you're 100% remote. Teachers are really taxed for time. So the time to participate in professional development, to learn those new tools to use to teach virtually effectively, and so many other things, it's just so limited. And in some spaces, it's still business as usual. We're still going to teach the same way. We're still going to teach the students who we taught 5 years ago versus the students who are in front of us today. So it becomes a bigger issue when we're now in a pandemic where there's so many factors that limit how information is received.
Yes, absolutely. Just venturing into another hot topic, and Danielle, I'm interested to get your thoughts about this. There are people that are questioning whether or not students should actually be tested when they come back to school. What are your thoughts about that? Should we be initiating testing for our students when they return?
I don't think there should be any high stakes testing, like in terms of state standardized testing, because I do think that that is going to continue to exacerbate the equity issues that we face. But I do believe that institutions should be administering their own internal assessments, because you can't identify where you need to take a child to if you don't know where they are. So even during this process, we've continued to utilize our interim assessments, but that's a learning tool for us as educators, not a tool that is then at some point potentially used in the decision-making process for students. So if we're talking about giving a New Jersey State learning assessment, I mean, right now it is still on the table for our scholars. The state has applied for a waiver to the federal government, but we haven't heard anything yet. So with that being on the table, if I have a sixth grader that is thinking about one day applying to a program such as SEEDS or the White Foundation or ABC, that becomes a very high stakes test for them, because those scores determine and help to determine if that student is selected. And I don't think that during a year that students have experienced so much loss, trauma in general, that they should be held to the same standard and having to take such a test. So as an educator, I am opposed to state testing for this year. I think there should be some kind of gap year, but I do believe that institutions and organizations need to do their own internal assessments.
Mm-hmm. And Shalonda, just tossing it back to you, I'm interested to hear your thoughts there. Should there be standardized testing? Should we wait for it?
So in my current building, we have been administering the Mapp assessment. And the concerning part of that for me is it continues along the lines of business as usual. So this year's Mapp results are being compared to last year's Mapp results, and decisions for supplemental services and for other supports are being made, not considering that we're in a pandemic. Things are going to be different. One, they were taking an assessment virtually, you know, and add to the loss, a student may not be able to focus because they've experienced a loss, or they may have had COVID, or their whole household may have had COVID that impacted their ability to perform well on the test. So being judged on a state test, considering the circumstances, is truly, truly going to be an injustice to our kids.
Absolutely. Mayor Mapp, just listening to the conversation as it stands right now, we're getting into policies and legislation and what it looks like for us to make sure we're pushing the appropriate things for our children. I'm interested to hear from you. What role do you feel like you play in the grand scheme of how we're reviving education in our city?
Well, I do believe that I have an important role to play as the mayor of the city, as the leader of the city. Um, People look to me for some level of involvement in terms of the education that happens in our city. And so I think that I have a responsibility to be involved and to collaborate with our local public school district, to collaborate with our charter schools and with institutions like the Second Street Youth Center. And I do believe when I think of, the last question that you asked relative to testing, I must confess that when you first asked about testing, I'm thinking COVID-19 testing. So I am so glad that Danielle was given that question first. But I think that as mayor of this city, that I need to weigh in on the things that are happening locally in our public school district and to influence policy the best way that I can to help strengthen the quality of education that we provide to our young people so that, our district could be looked upon differently and more in a positive light than the current negative light in which it is seen. And that is so because we have not been performing at the level that we are capable of and at the level that our young people are entitled to perform. And so we have work to do, but it has to be a partnership, a collaboration with local elected officials, as well as members of our local school district and our charter schools that exist here in our city.
Yes. I'm so happy that you clarified that. I definitely meant standardized testing and not vaccine testing. But since you brought it up, I'm wondering, well, let me share this first. I am the CEO of an organization called Project Ready. We commissioned a poll where 67% of Black families specifically said they would probably or definitely stay remote if in-person learning became an opportunity. And I'm speculating if that's a safety concern, but wanting to hear from you all experts about why Black families in particular may not be as excited about returning to in-person learning. Leah, if I could kick off with you.
Oh, she's gonna let me jump right in.
Yes, so, let's jump right in.
Here we go. I believe as African Americans, we have seen the level of disparity that has happened with us and how we have been utilized in some of the experimentation that has gone on as it relates to medicine in the medical community. So I'm going to start off there, right? And as a result, it has created an intrinsic distrust of certain areas of medical community. So here we are now faced with COVID-19, and we really have to look at the science. And maybe as a people, we have not realized that as the science has evolved, we have also evolved with it. And now we're not just the outsiders in this conversation. We're actually part of the development. We're actually part of all of the science that's going forward. And so we have to really begin to embrace that. We have to really begin to embrace the fact that we do have highly educated, highly skilled, highly trained brothers and sisters who are out there on the ground, who are part of the researching of this entire process, and that they have been our voice and that we do have a voice. So I really would like to start with that as a premise. And so with that being the premise, I do believe that we can bring children back to school. I believe that what we're facing right now is that school has been one of the safest places for children for so very long. And in situations with communities, with parents who have food insecurity, in situations where we have parents who, in some cases, because of domestic violence, they have been in their homes so long, we actually are jeopardizing the safety of children by keeping them in homes for such a great period of time. So I think in our Black and Brown communities, because of the level of distrust that historically has happened because of how we've been treated, and also the conversation about racial injustice, I think that that is now transferred over into the thought process about bringing children back to school. But I'm saying as a parent, I'm also saying as a grandparent, I'm saying as a parent of 210 children at Second Street Youth Center, that safety is the #1 concern of every educator, and safety is the #1 concern of all of our institutions. And we truly believe that our schools are safe and that you can bring your children back. And that in my case, I would say you should bring your children back to school.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Shalonda, interested to hear your thoughts.
I also think too, another concern with sending students back to school, with parents making that choice, is that everything is so uncertain that there isn't much in control of if, there's a spread in the classroom or someone has been diagnosed with COVID, what to do. There's just so much uncertainty that lies there that parents feel the safest place for them is at home. And then there's the other level of planning and logistics for parents who work. So I have to go to work. I have to figure out now how I'm going to change up our routine and schedule from what it's been to get you to school safely, to provide the proper tools for you, because PPE provision could be an issue because the reality is all buildings aren't supplied the same way.
Yeah.
Every place is not doing the same thing, and so now parents have to be concerned if whether or not they prepared their children properly. Do I have the hand sanitizer, the mask, the, proper tools to send you off? And as it stands, I spent like a good portion of my salary buying supplies, just notebooks, pencils, pens. A lot of that rested on schools. And can schools handle that may be a concern for parents, especially when they aren't able to.
Absolutely. And Danielle, you mentioned that you are already bringing your teachers back March 15th. And I'm imagining that that's in preparation of you guys reopening.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you all are communicating with your community to ensure that they understand the safety protocols you're putting in place.
Well, it started really several months ago with surveys to parents, even identifying, I think in the beginning made some assumptions about how our parents were living, whether they were living with extended family and their immediate family, because we wanted to make sure one of the things that when we decided to bring people back, we wouldn't contribute to a community spread. So It was really important for us to know families' traveling situations. Had they traveled outside of the country? What were their living situations like? Had anyone tested positive for COVID? So we sent out a survey to our families back in January to assess that. Then once those results began to come back, we kind of settled on a date and we said, okay, the 15th of March, we could bring the teachers back. But before bringing the teachers back, we also had one-to-one meetings with each teacher to figure out their levels of concern, what did they, from their perspective and with their lens, what did they see as areas that we really needed to focus in on? Once we received all that data back, we knew that we couldn't bring the students back at the same time. So we decided to do a period of time where we would bring the students back 2 weeks after. So our students are coming back on March 29th. That gives us an opportunity to really make sure that teachers understand all the protocols that are in place in terms of logistics, in terms of having the energy to what this is going to look like differently. And once we put all those pieces in place, the building has been getting ready throughout the year. We had an environmental hygienist come in to make sure that our airflow was okay. Our building is older, so really making sure that from a perspective of how many kids could be in a room at one time. All of those logistical pieces went into our planning at this point in time. And so we know that we're only bringing 25% of our capacity back on a daily basis. So no classroom will have more than 5 students in the class. Right now, we have a survey out where parents are actually opting in to our hybrid program, or they choose to remain virtual. Once we get all of those numbers back, we'll be able to determine where some kids might be able to come on campus more than just the one day that we have planned right now. They may be able to come 2 days because more parents may decide to keep their child home. But one of the pieces I think that we're overlooking in terms of parents keeping their children home is our buildings and the state of disrepair some of our buildings in our communities are in. And that's because for years, we haven't received the same kind of money from the School Development Authority that some other places have received to update and upgrade their buildings. And I'm pretty certain that parents, they're aware of that. So they understand and they read the newspaper, you know, they see what's happening in other towns that have older buildings as well. And so that becomes a concern, because if your building has not been updated to make sure that airflow is okay, to make sure that you have operational windows that you can open and let fresh air in, to make sure that, you know, sanitizing equipment and PPE equipment is all available, I know I wouldn't want to send my child back. And I think that many of our parents are looking at those issues as well and determining whether or not they are ready to send their child back to school. And so in communicating that, we've done surveys, and now we will have several different focus groups before we bring our parents back that are happening over the next couple of weeks. We've done some videos that we've put out to our parents as well, just explaining to them from the start of the year what the year was going to look like, how we were doing things differently, because we had an orientation session in the beginning of the year for our students where they did come into the building, but only for one day that they were able to come into the building to meet their teacher, to learn the different procedures that were in place. So we have a 4-point entry inspection that happens in the morning where kids get sanitizer. They sanitize their shoes as well. They get their temperature checks. They enter in through different doors so that they're socially distanced. And so that allowed us to really do a test run for whenever we knew we would be entering back into the building. So we have that knowledge, and we begin to share that with parents as well, as that this is what it may look like, our drop up and pick off procedures being different. And we continue to convey that information, whether it's through email, whether it's through phone calls, small focus groups. We just have had an abundance of communication with our parents this year, probably more than we normally do, not probably, but much more than we normally do, right, to help them to get ready and to know the things that we are doing as an organization to make this different and make sure that it's safe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Danielle, you touched on a critical point that I think has been coming up across the nation, specifically in Black and Brown communities, which is the focus on school construction and how we're thinking about buildings and how we're thinking about returning to buildings that may not have actually been safe before COVID-19. Mayor Mapp, what are your thoughts there? What do you see the role of the city of Plainfield playing in ensuring that our students can continue to return to safe buildings?
Well, I think that's very important. The safety is number one for me at every level, whether it's in the schools or, you know, in the community. And so I know that there has been a focus on the part of the local Plainfield School District on making sure that they have the PPEs and that they have the sanitizing supplies to make sure workstations, desks, and, you know, common spaces are all sanitized, and that teachers will be provided with masks and face shields and things of that sort. So making sure that the level of safety is enhanced in every building is critically important. And our health department will play a role in that by communicating constantly with our local school district to make sure that no stone is left unturned and that we don't return our students to environments that are not safe. But I think because of the effort and the dedication that is being put into this by school districts, not only in Plainfield, but across the board, because of the recognized need to have our students return to the classroom, I believe that districts are going over and above, and they are spending whatever resources they can. They're being provided with some of these resources, but it's an investment from their budgets as well that they're making to make sure that the classroom is safe for student, teachers, and administrators. And so we in our health department will continue to play a role in that by, speaking to our local schools and making sure that they're what they need to be from the point of view of safety.
Yes.
I love that. I just wanted to jump in real quick because I do have a little color on this.
Yes.
As our governor would say, a little color on this. I'm very fortunate that we have an amazing partnership with the Plainfield Public School District through our contract with the Office of Early Childhood. So as a result, I've been privy to a lot of the conversations and the marketing as it relates to communicating the work that has been done actually in the K through 12 buildings. So the Plainfield School District did receive CARES money, which was great. And they were able to use a lot of that CARES money to do some of the very upgrades with HVAC and things of that nature that the mayor is talking about and that we know the CDC is looking for. So I think one of the things is just looking at how we communicate that work that has been done in the buildings already to parents so that parents know that there has been a great investment made. At 2nd Street Youth Center, we are in a brand new building, you should know, a brand new amazing building with a brand new HVAC system. And we even added an air purification program to our HVAC system. So I think beginning to have a better conversation and that communication and pushing that communication out about what has been done is critical to help parents feel more comfortable. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that, Leah. If I'm honest, I may just come and start working from your recreation center.
It's so
like I'm gonna be safe.
It's so funny because I wanted to chime in and exactly what Leah was saying about the CARES Act funding that did come through for COVID relief. And I think from a political perspective that this has been an opportunity to do some of those pieces that hadn't been done for years in our buildings. And, as they passed the second round of COVID release, or as the Biden administration begins to look at what other pieces for COVID relief need to come through, I hope that they continue to put in additional funding for schools that need upgrades, because doing things to your HVAC system, doing things to make sure that, you have operational windows, all of those things are cost prohibitive for budgets that have had flat student allocation dollars. So, while that has remained flat, having this additional CARES Act funding that has been in place to help us purchase things such as PPE equipment, make sure we can upgrade our HVAC systems, add in air purification systems, making sure all of those things happen take resources. But from a political perspective, I think if our New Jersey delegation can continue to lean in that regard for our school districts, for our municipalities to receive this kind of funding, it only is such a benefit for districts and places that have been, I think, underserved in this capacity for many years. You can go into districts that have 100-year-old buildings that maybe just have seen a coat of paint and not much else. So I think that, knowing that this needs to be where we figure out, as Sierra would say, how do we level up? How do we use this as an opportunity instead of just looking at the disadvantages that have because of all of the lives that we lost that we can never replace? But what are the opportunities that also sit here for us to begin to level the playing field for our students and our families and communities?
Yes, Danielle, thank you so much for that. And while we're on the topic of safety, Mayor Mapp, I want to get you, and then Shalonda, I want to get you on this. The governor has recently expanded vaccinations so that teachers have the opportunity to receive vaccines. And Mayor, I'm wondering if you think that this could contribute to the safety of in-person learning once we resume to in-person learning.
There's no question. That is absolutely correct. And I must tell you that I have raised the question with the governor's office on a number of occasions, and as recently as yesterday in a call that the urban mayors had with the governor's office. We've been pushing for a dedicated number of doses for school districts. And I think it's important because it adds that additional layer of safety beyond the PPEs and so on, having vaccinations in the arms of students and teachers. That's so critically important. And so I have gotten inquiries from the NJEA and from the school district about the need to have doses dedicated to teachers and students and administrators. And so I have been lobbying for that as well, because I know what a difference that would make.
Absolutely. Shalonda, can I get your thoughts here? It is having the ability to receive vaccination as a teacher something that's important and something that you think will contribute to the safety of our schools?
I think that teachers being able to receive vaccines will definitely make teachers want to return back to the classroom. Understaffing has been an issue for the 8 years that I've been in Plainfield. The schools I've worked in were heavily understaffed. And so the building conditions, that's one part of it, but having teachers to come in, or even highly qualified substitutes to come in to cover classes when teachers are out, is a concern. And so when teachers are out, sometimes students are sent in the cafeteria or in one common space because there's so many teachers out. So maybe the vaccine will attract people back into buildings for staffing, so that our kids have people to ensure that those safety protocols are being met, to be in there with them. So I think that it would help.
Absolutely. And just bringing the conversation back to the tippy top, Danielle had mentioned that this is a unique moment for us to reimagine education. And our final question here, open question to all of you, what programs do you think we should pursue to give children an advantage in the city of Plainfield? Danielle, why don't I kick off with you?
You know, Shennell, that is, I think, such a robust question.
Yes.
Because I think it is more, it's not narrowed down to just one program. It's not narrowed down to one set of things that we should do. I think the possibilities should be limitless for what we offer to the students of Plainfield. You know, especially as we are in the process of opening our high school, where we're partnering with Union County College, and we've been laying out our scope and sequence. And so I was just having this conversation today where we have a track that is really looking to bring and create a systematic change, because we have engineering and education as one of the tracks. And so our partnership with Union County College will give our graduating 12th graders the opportunity to receive their associate's degree while they're also receiving their high school diploma. But they have an opportunity to receive that degree on a track that places them with engineering and education so that we can increase the number of Black and Latino teachers that we have teaching subjects such as math and science, right? If they so should choose, or if they choose to go into the field of engineering, being, we're underrepresented in that field as well. So I think that when I think of programming that needs to take place for our students, I think that programming just needs to be exposure. Leah started off earlier talking about that developmental gap because we don't have, sometimes our families don't have the opportunity to have resources to expose our students. And I think where those opportunities are missing, it is paramount that schools and begin to pick up that baton and say, what is it that we need to expose our children to? It naturally comes for some people just to realize I need to give them everything that I've had, everything that I didn't have, I want them to be able to have, right? But for some people, it doesn't come naturally to, and where it is not happening naturally, I think the school, it is important that educators realize that the charge is left up to us to expose in that regard. So whether it's a Broadway play, whether it's making sure that they have some kind of experience with the arts, whether it's making sure that they're involved in extracurricular activities that expose them to math and science and STEM, whatever the case may be, it needs to be robust because our students are not monolithic. They are not one way. And because that is not the case, we need to make sure that they have at their disposal an opportunity to try many various programs out and see which one is the best fit for them.
Absolutely.
And I think that starts also with inventories of students, just doing an inventory of our students to see where their interests lie.
Absolutely. This has been an incredible conversation. We've touched on so many topics that I know are top of mind for Plainfield residents. This is Plainfield Speaks, Plainfield. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have concerns, please write to us. Let us know so that we can take the time alongside Mayor Adrian Mapp to address the commentary and to bring guests that can also give us the information that we need in order to make the informed decisions that we need to be making. And with that, Mayor, I'm going to have you just say your goodbyes and close us out. And we'll be excited to see you all soon for our next episode of Plainfield Speaks. Mayor Matt?
Well, thank you, SHENNELL, for moderating this episode of Plainfield Speaks. And I want to thank all of the educators, Danielle, Shalonda, and Leah, for participating and for providing us with some quality commentary and information that would help us as we confront the challenges that we still face in this global pandemic. And I want to encourage all parents to look with an open mind in terms of the need for us to come back into our classroom. So I want to thank each and every one of you, and I want you to make sure that your students are safe and you stay safe and be well. Thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.